Curonian Spit's shifting sand dunes in Lithuania can move several meters each year, a rare natural phenomenon that once swallowed whole villages or beyahs and continually reshapes the coastline. Do you know the Curonian Spit sand dunes conceal buried villages and shipwrecks beneath their sands, so every step feels like walking over layers of forgotten history? Trakai Island Castle rises from the waters of Lake Galve as one of the few medieval island fortresses in Europe that has been reconstructed almost exactly on its original foundations. Its red brick towers reflect in the lake, and the surrounding chain of 21 islands makes the setting uniquely insular and defensible. Built in the 14th century by Grand Duke Kęstutis, and later expanded by Vytautas the Great, the castle became a political and military hub of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Walk the wooden footbridge and you cross centuries in minutes, from carved beams into vaulted halls that now hold armory, portraits, and stories of sieges. Beneath the ramparts, fishermen still cast nets where long ago war galleys once slipped between islands. A small Karaim community nearby preserves a flavor of Crimea brought here by Vytautas, and their traditional meat pastry, kibinai, is as much a local emblem as the castle itself. Trakai's reconstruction in the 20th century was an archaeological and romantic mission, piecing life back into walls that had fallen to ruin. Today, the museum's exhibits trace trade routes, diplomatic marriages, and weaponry that link these lakes to the Baltic and beyond. From the highest battlement, the view sweeps back toward Vilnius, only a short ride away, reminding visitors how political power radiated outward from this island. Seasonal festivals turn the castle into a living stage, where medieval crafts, horsemen, and falconry recall ceremonies once held by dukes. Yet for many, the quietest revelation comes at dawn, when mist lifts off Galve and the castle appears to float, an echo of Lithuania's layered past poised between water and land. Hidden within coastal dunes, Palanga Botanical Park preserves one of the world's rarest living exhibits, rhododendron species that flourish far north in Lithuania's mild coastal microclimate. Do you know Palanga Botanical Park shelters more than 2,000 plant species, including exotic rhododendrons that burst into colors rarely seen so far north? Walk the winding alleys, and you're tracing a living time capsule planted by 19th century aristocrats and sustained through turbulent history. Ancient linden avenues and sculpted pavilions hide microhabitats where Mediterranean sit side by side, baffling botanists. Even the soil here tells a story. Layers of marine sands, peat, and imported topsoil form a patchwork that supports species from distant climates. Follow the paths, and you'll find quiet glasshouses where orchids and succulents were preserved through 2 world wars and Soviet neglect. Those sanctuaries now act like libraries of genetic memory, offering seedlings to restoration projects across the Baltic region. Some plants in the park exist nowhere else within Lithuania, a living inventory of botanical refugees that slipped north during ancient climate shifts. Scientists and amateur naturalists come to compare notes and sometimes to rediscover species lost from other European gardens. The park connects to Palanga town by a fragrant promenade, so visitors move from curated nature into seaside culture without missing a beat. That seamless transition explains why generations have made the park a social heart. Wedding photos, picnics, and solitary benches framed by rare blooms. As you explore, ask how human care and natural quirks combine to create this unexpected refuge on Lithuania's coast. By the time we leave Palanga Botanical Park, you'll see it not just as a garden, but as proof that climates, histories, and people can conspire to protect the extraordinary. Beneath the confluence of the Nemunas and Nemunas rivers, Kaunas Old Town unveils like a living medieval map, its cobbles tracing centuries of trade and conflict. Do you know that Kaunas Castle, one of the region's oldest brick fortresses, began as a timber stronghold and was rebuilt in stone in the 14th century? Walk through the narrow lanes and you pass the town hall, the White Swan, where merchants, knights, and later civic leaders shaped the city's destiny. The square around it still hums with market rhythms and clandestine stories hidden in arched cellars. A short turn brings you to the House of Perkunas, whose carved pagan motifs and Gothic facade whisper the city's Baltic pagan past. Across the street, the Devil's Museum keeps an eccentric collection that reveals how faith and folklore braided together here. Climb toward the castle ruins, and you feel the gravity of sieges and siegers, while below the riverbanks begin their slow, patient conversation with the city. Every corner seems to offer a perilous charm, a carved gargoyle watching from a rooftop or a plaque commemorating a poet who once argued on these stones. And because Kaunas never stopped evolving, a tram of stories carries you onward toward the riverfront, where bridges promise new chapters. Follow that river east, and you'll find green promenades and Baroque churches that echo the old town's civic pulse in quieter, reflective notes. Those quieter notes prepare you for the grander revelations waiting at Pažaislis and other nearby sanctuaries, proving this compact city unfolds like a book whose chapters are all within walking distance. To understand Kaunas Old Town is to read how a city's stones remember trade routes, battles, and bursts of artistic daring. Stay with us, and we'll move from these cobbled pages into the stories living beyond, where each street connects to the next like a river's tributary. From the pine-scented dunes of the Curonian Spit, we drift along the Baltic coast to a seaside town where playful cranes and wind-sculpted beaches frame a different maritime story. Ventspils' seaside opens like a living postcard. Broad sandy strands, carefully tended promenades, and a harbor that has become a quiet powerhouse of Baltic trade and local life. Walk its boardwalks, and you'll find families and fishermen rubbing shoulders with art installations and manicured parks, each corner offering a tiny surprise that feels handcrafted for curiosity. The beaches here earned international recognition for cleanliness and safety, so the sea shimmers with an almost civic pride that locals treat like a public jewel. Visit the small maritime exhibits, and you'll understand why the town measures its identity by the sea, by the ships that pass through, and by the festivals that mark each fishing season. From the quiet comfort of a cafe overlooking the harbor, you can trace a path on the horizon that leads back toward the Lithuanian Spit and forward to other Baltic ports, an unbroken ribbon of shoreline stories. Here, the practical and the poetic meet. Cranes unload cargo while artists and children reimagine the coast as a place for play, memory, and small, stubborn traditions. Stick around, and the everyday rituals of Ventspils, morning nets, evening lights on the pier, the slow turning of ships, start to feel like a private language spoken only by the sea and those who live beside it. The Curonian Spit hosts one of the world's rarest coastal formations, an almost 100-kilometer-long chain of migrating sand dunes that separate the Curonian Lagoon from the Baltic Sea. Do you know the Curonian Spit's dunes once buried entire villages, and that villagers planted vast pine forests, which today form a living barrier against the sand? Walk its narrow rim, and you will pass Parnidis Dune, a white wave of sand crowned with a carved sundial that frames the lagoon like a mirror. From there, the terrain folds into the famous dancing forest, where pines grow twisted into spruils and knots, a botanical mystery that has sparked countless legends. Amber, washed ashore along the Spit, ties the landscape to ancient trade routes and the fishermen of Nida, whose stilt houses and wooden chapels punctuate dunes and forests. The Curonian Lagoon, calm and shallow behind the Spit, hosts flocks of migrating birds and fishermen in reed boats who still read the wind as their ancestors did. Human hands and time tussle here. 19th century afforestation projects transformed destructive sand into protected habitat, preserving ghostly remnants of sunken settlements. UNESCO recognized this fragile balance, but visitors often feel the tension between motion and preservation the moment they set foot on the ridge. In the next chapter, we trace the fishermen's routes from Nida's harbor toward Klaipėda, where the sea opens wider and new histories begin. You can still find submerged foundations and stone markers that hint at the villages swallowed by the migrating dunes, their stories preserved in lullabies and place names. Walking the wooden boardwalks across the dunes, you become keenly aware of how delicate the balance is between human desire to explore and nature's slow, unstoppable motion. Medvėgalis Hill rises above the Žemaitija lowlands with twin summits that shelter one of Europe's most intact medieval hill fort complex. Its grassy crowns and ancient ramparts hide layers of human history and an ecological refuge for rare orchids and steppe grasses. Local legends call it the Bear's Nest and whisper of battles where wooden palisades turned back invaders. Archaeologists have uncovered traces of fortifications and charcoal, that suggest repeated rebuildings from the Iron Age through the Middle Ages, he says. Hiking the gentle slopes, you suddenly find yourself amid ringed embankments that map defensive thinking before written chronicles. From these earthworks, you can see a patchwork of pastures and wetlands that once fed its people and fed the myths that protected it. Botanists prize the hill for its mosaic of habitats, where sunlit ridges support limestone-loving species uncommon elsewhere in Lithuania. Birdwatchers note rare migrants using the thermals above the Twin Peaks as a navigational cue across the Baltic corridor. In spring, delicate violets and orchids push through thin soils atop ancient stone, creating an unexpected carpet of color. In autumn, wind-sculpted grasses turn bronze, and the contours of ramparts become sharply legible against low light. A short trail from the village leads to a wooden observation platform that reframes the hill as both fortress and observatory. Local custodians maintain the site with traditional grazing to keep shrub encroachment at bay, preserving its open character. Time here feels layered. You can almost trace a line from Neolithic hearths to medieval watchlights to present-day stargazers. That continuity makes Medvėgalis not just a landmark, but a living cross-section of Lithuanian cultural and natural resilience. The Nemunas Delta, one of the world's last primeval floodplain forests, cradles Tviškės Manor on the edge of Lithuania's slow-moving waterways. Do you know the manor's gardens were designed to harness the delta's seasonal floods, creating living terraces that support rare wetland orchids and nesting white storks? Tviškės stands like a memory-laden crossroads where noble families, river traders, and forest keepers intersected for centuries. Its red brick wings and faded frescoes whisper stories of 18th century banquets, wartime refuge, and clandestine meetings that shaped regional fate. Wandering its avenue of linden trees, you can still trace paths that once led directly to the Nemunas, linking the manor to distant ports and marsh trackways. Those same waterways carried timber to Klaipėda, ideas to Kaunas, and birds along migratory corridors that knit Lithuania to the Curonian Spit. Inside, parquet floors conceal escape passages and archives where estate ledgers reveal unusual practices. Bee gardens, fish ponds, and experimental apple orchards adapted to floods. Local stewards preserved folk remedies and harvest rites, connecting Tviškės seasons to the rhythms of nearby villages and the forests beyond. Today, Tviškės is both museum and living laboratory, where craftsmen revive lost weaving patterns and ecologists chart returning beavers and rare marsh ferns. Visitors leave with more than photographs. They carry fragments of landscape memory that make places like Trakai's lakes and Šiauliai's hills feel part of the same story. At dusk, storks settle on the manor roof as if marking a long-standing treaty between nature and culture, a fragile agreement worth guarding. If you follow the river downstream from Tviškės, small villages and reed-lined channels reveal how Lithuania's past survives inside its wetlands. So when people ask why Tviškės matters, the answer is not just its stones, but the living web of rivers, forests, and communities it anchors. Understanding this manor means tracing routes that lead us from ornate gates to the open sea and back through the deeper folds of Lithuanian memory. Come closer and you will hear bees that were introduced centuries ago, still humming the same lullaby as the river. Tviškės is less a destination and more a hinge. Turn it and the rest of Lithuania's hidden landscapes swing into view. Perched on a steep hill overlooking the winding Nemunas River, Gediminas Tower is the last visible fragment of medieval Vilnius Castle. Its red brick silhouette has guarded the city for centuries and still offers one of the most panoramic views in the Baltic states. Climb the stone steps and you step into layered history, from Grand Duke Gediminas legends to the scars left by sieges and revolutions. Inside, museum displays and weathered walls tell stories of royal proclamations, local artisans, and Lithuania's long struggle for identity. Look out from the battlements, and the panorama stitches together terracotta roofs, church spires, and the ribbon of the Neris, a living map of Vilnius's soul. On misty mornings, the tower seems to float above a sea of fog, turning familiar streets into a ghostly cinematic landscape. Few visitors know that fragments of the tower's oldest masonry carry carbon traces dating back to the 13th century, making it one of the region's most authentic medieval remains. Conservation work has revealed hidden frescoes and medieval graffiti that whisper voices of ordinary citizens as much as of kings. A powder room, once used to store gunpowder, now holds exhibits about the Lithuanian flag, first raised from this hill during the 1918 independence movement. That symbolic act reconnected the tower to national memory, and a replica of the original flag still flutters from its top on ceremonial days. Local storytellers say the tower acts like a living calendar, marking festivals, coronations, and seasons by the long shadows it casts across the city. When evening falls, lanterns along the ramparts and the gleam on the river turn Gediminas Tower into a beacon that draws neighborhoods together. For those who linger, a final surprise waits. Engraved stones at the base bear names and dates from travelers centuries old, a human ledger of passage. Descend and follow the cobblestones toward Cathedral Square, carrying the tower's line of sight into the layered heart of the city. The Curonian Spit harbors Europe's fastest-moving coastal dunes, with some ridges advancing several meters each year. Do you know the Curonian Spit once swallowed entire villages, forcing families to abandon their homesteads as sand reclaimed the land? Today, those same shifting sands cradle a fragile ribbon of pine forest and amber-strewn shores. Wind-carved ridgelines like the Parnidis Dune rise like soft glaciers between lagoon and sea. At sunrise, the dunes glow with a honeyed light that makes amber glint like buried gold. Local fishermen long collected those translucent treasures, earning the coast its nickname, the Amber Coast. The Spit is a living landscape. Dunes migrate, forests recover, and human paths are remade each season. Small settlements, such as Nida and Uodkranta, nestle where people have learned to live with movement. Here, wooden fish processing sheds and curd nets sit beside dunes that once erased entire roads. Trails lead from curving beaches into whispering pines, where the air smells of resin and salt. The Curonian Lagoon mirrors the sky while the Baltic churns beyond a thin, changing spine of sand. Bird migrations funnel along the Spit, making it a vital corridor for thousands of winged travelers. In some places, the dunes have formed towering walls, revealing centuries of buried artifacts and stories. Archaeologists still unearth pottery, tools, and traces of vanished homesteads as the sands shift. Walking the crest at Parnidis or climbing the dunes near Nida is to feel time move beneath your feet. Each footprint is temporary, erased by wind, yet recorded in the landscape's slow, relentless rewriting. Conservators now ride the thin line between allowing natural change and protecting living forests from collapse. Their work is both scientific and poetic, planting pines, stabilizing slopes, and listening to the land. To cross from beach to lagoon on the Spit is to travel between two seas of color and texture. The transition stitches together coastal dunes, reed beds, and human villages into one fragile, shifting tapestry. UNESCO recognized the Curonian Spit for its unique interaction of people and nature. That designation protects not only scenery, but the stories of adaptation etched into sand and wood. Kernavė's 5 mounds rise like time-worn sentinels above the Nemunas River Valley, marking Lithuania's earliest urban heartbeat. Do you know that beneath each grassy crest, archaeologists have uncovered layers of settlements spanning more than a millennium, from Iron Age villages to medieval wooden fortifications? Once a bustling trade and ritual center, Kernavė was repeatedly rebuilt after fires and sieges, its earthworks recording human resilience. Excavations have revealed hearths, pottery shards painted with unexpected motifs, and timber post holes that trace the outlines of long-lost halls. Walkers today follow gentle ridgelines where ancient processions pause to perform rites, tethered to seasons and river cycles. The mounds themselves act as open-air archives, preserving pollen and charcoal that let scientists reconstruct centuries of landscape change. Up close, the slopes feel ordinary, but each contour corresponds to a different chapter. A defensive rampart, a domestic quarter, a ceremonial plateau. At the summit, you can imagine signal fires communicating with other hill forts, a prehistoric network linking Kernavė to distant communities. UNESCO recognized Kernavė not just for its artifacts, but for the living connection between natural topography and human design that shaped Lithuania's identity. That designation helped protect not only the trenches and finds, but the panoramic views where river, forest, and field still meet much as they did 1,000 years ago. Interpretive trails guide visitors from mound to mound, with explanatory panels that make the deep past feel surprisingly immediate. Local storytellers and seasonal reenactments revive fragments of tradition, blurring lines between excavation report and communal memory. From Kernavė's vantage, the route into later chapters of Lithuanian history becomes clear, and one next step leads toward the brick castles of Trakai and the bustling medieval streets of Vilnius. Follow that thread, and you'll see how the raw geography preserved at Kernavė shaped political, economic, and spiritual life across the region. Archaeologists continue to uncover surprises, including trade beads from distant lands and bone tools that suggest specialized crafts. Every new discovery complicates tidy historical narratives, revealing Kernavė as a dynamic hub rather than a static ruin. Walking its mounds at dawn, you sense layers of human intention pressed into soil, where each footfall echoes centuries of decisions. That palpable sense of continuity is what turns a field into a story and makes Kernavė a living classroom for anyone curious about how landscapes shape cultures. Hidden among Baltic shores is one of the world's rare inland dune ecosystems, the Curonian Spit, and even its winds leave traces in Vilnius Old Town. Do you know the shifting sands of the Curonian Spit and the mist of the Žemaitijos wetlands historically shaped the city's microclimate and storytelling traditions? Walk into Vilnius Old Town and time narrows to alleyways lined with Gothic spires and Baroque carvings. Paisley Street hums with bookshops and cafes that lead naturally toward the red brick silhouette of Gediminas Castle Tower. At the Castle Hill, views unfold across the Nemunas River into Užupis, a self-declared republic where art spills onto bridges. From Užupis, the path loops back through the cobbles to the Gate of Dawn, whose chapel harbors the miraculous icon that pilgrims have kissed for centuries. Vilnius University, one of the oldest in Eastern Europe, hides Renaissance courtyards where scholars once copied maps of the Baltic coast. Those maps connected this inland capital to the trading routes that sent amber and stories down to Klaipėda and the Curonian Lagoon. St. Anne's Church, stitched from red bricks, looks fragile until you realize it inspired Napoleon's famously misplaced admiration. Nearby, the presidential palace faces Cathedral Square, where pagan and Christian histories collide in stone and ritual. As dusk falls, lamplight reveals frescoes in hidden chapels and the silhouette of towers stitched into the skyline. One winding stairway drops you into a literary cafe, where poets still debate the best route out of history's mazes. Every alley bends toward another secret. A courtyard, a bell, a plaque, inviting you to step deeper into the city's layered memory. And as you emerge toward the riverbank, the green sweep of Vingis Park waits, linking urban stone back to Lithuania's forests and dunes. Vilnius Old Town refuses a single story. It insists you stitch together its fragments into your own journey. By following cobbles from chapel to quay, you trace not just a city, but the countryside and sea that shaped it. The Nemunas River Delta holds one of Europe's largest inland reed beds and marsh mosaics, forming a rare wetland labyrinth. Do you know, the Nemunas River Delta becomes a bird superhighway each spring, funneling tens of thousands of storks, cranes, and raptors toward the Baltic. Braided channels split the land into reed-lined islands, where oak groves and marsh ponds cradle hidden life. Fishermen still use flat wooden boats to thread the narrow waterways, keeping skills and stories alive. White-tailed eagles patrol the skies, beavers sculpt banks, and the corncrake's secretive song echoes from the tall grass. At migration peak, the air darkens with wings, and researchers tag birds to map these ancient routes. Conservation here mixes traditional reed cutting and grazing with modern monitoring to keep meadows open and species thriving. Those practices also preserve the cultural landscape of fishing hamlets, wooden chapels, and thatched roofs. Where the Nemunas widens into the Curonian lagoon, currents carry amber and sediments toward the narrow sand spine of the Curonian Spit. That sandy barrier links the wetland's quiet waters to Nida's dunes, making the delta the river's gateway to the sea. Dawn walks reveal blackened tree stumps preserved in peat, ghost forests drowned by shifting water levels. Seasonal floods set the tempo. Ice melts, fish arrive, birds refuel, and the landscape pulses with life. Scientists call the Nemunas Delta a living laboratory, where changes in climate and human care are written in reed and mud. But the most surprising secret is how local hands have learned to live with water, turning floods into a foundation for nature and craft. Boat rides along tidal creeks reveal rare flowers, migrating fish, and flocks that land like living islands on the water. In winter, the delta transforms again. Frozen channels become pathways for hardy locals, and slunt hunts for northern lights in clear skies. Artisans harvest reeds to roof houses and make baskets, keeping techniques that mirror the rhythm of seasons. Follow the river's course, and you will flow from this intricate delta to the open curves of the Curonian Spit, where sand meets sea. As the sun sets over the Curonian Spit, its living dunes whisper the same history that shaped the fishermen's villages and the amber-strewn shore. From the glassy mirror of the Curonian Lagoon, we sailed back towards Klaipėda, where shipping lanes and Germanic streets lead us inland to the fortified silhouette of Trakai Castle. Trakai's island keep recalls medieval Lithuania and points eastward to Vilnius, whose Baroque skyline and cobbled alleys keep centuries of resistance and celebration alive. A short drive from Vilnius takes us to Kernavė's ancient mounds, where layers of human stories fold into the landscape and flow north into Anykščiai's whispering pines. Anykščiai hands us to Aukštaitija's glacial lakes, where canoe paths and wooden homesteads trace the contours of a calmer, older Lithuania. Nearby Nida, on the Curonian Spit, returns us to those towering dunes and the slow, wind-sculpted villages, completing an arc from capital to coast and back again. Yet the country's soul is marked not only by landscapes but by memory. The Hill of Crosses stands like an open-air ledger of faith and defiance, visible from the roads that link north to Šiauliai and onward. Even Druskininkai's healing springs and modern art installations are threaded into this map, where wellness, craft, and contemporary creativity answer the whispers of tradition. Taken together, these places are not isolated sites, but a braided narrative. Rivers that became roads, dunes that became boundaries, castles that became crossroads. If you follow them in order, each turn reveals how Lithuania stitched its forests, lakes, and shore into an intimate nation whose quiet surprises keep asking to be discovered again.